the story of a man who crossed the burning sands alone in the desert. The sun had no mercy that morning. It rose from the horizon like a blazing coin dropped from the hands of a god, spilling its light over a sea of endless gold. The air shimmered. The sands glowed as if alive, breathing heat, whispering secrets, and waiting for another soul to test its patience. And he came alone. A single man walked into that burning ocean of sand. His name was Ibrahim. He carried a small leather bag, a half-empty water flask, and the quiet determination of someone who had left everything behind. His clothes, once white, were now the color of dust and salt. His lips were cracked. His eyes, dark and steady, held no fear, only a purpose that refused to fade beneath the cruel desert sun. No one in the village believed he would return. They said the desert swallowed men whole. They said the sands could trick your eyes, twist your sense of direction, and lead you to your own doom. Some said the desert wasn't just a place, it was alive, ancient, and jealous of the living. But Ibrahim didn't listen. He had a reason to cross it, one that burned hotter than the sun itself. The first steps were heavy but sure. Each one left a deep print that the wind began to erase almost instantly. He looked back once, just once. The outline of the last palm tree blurred behind him, the faint shimmer of an oasis fading into mirage. Ahead was only heat, light, and silence. For a moment, the silence was comforting. It was clean, empty, like a new beginning. But soon the heat began to bite at his skin, and the silence turned cruel. The wind picked up, hissing through the dunes, lifting thin ribbons of sand that stung his face. Every step became an act of will. He remembered the words of an old traveler he once met in the village. The desert doesn't test your strength. It tests your reason for walking. Those words echoed in his mind. His reason was buried far behind him, in the ashes of a broken home, in a past that had left him hollow. He wasn't running away. He was crossing over to something else, something unknown. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe peace. Maybe death.
He didn't know yet.
By midday, the heat was unbearable. The sand beneath his feet was so hot it felt like walking on fire. The wind became still again, as if even it was too tired to move. He stopped on a high dune and took a sip from his flask. Only a few drops left. The water tasted like metal and dust, but it kept him alive. He looked across the horizon. The dunes rose and fell like waves frozen in time. Shadows trembled on their ridges. Far away, he thought he saw something, a glimmer of blue, maybe water. His heart jumped. But he knew better. The desert loved to play games with the desperate. He closed his eyes, inhaled the hot air, and forced himself to keep walking. Hours passed. The sun crawled slowly down the sky, but its fire never cooled. Sweat no longer came. His body was dry, his throat a knot of pain. He spoke to himself to stay sane. Just a few more steps, he whispered. One more dune. Then rest. Each dune was taller than it looked. He would climb, sink, stumble, and drag his body upward again. At the top, he'd see nothing but more dunes, stretching forever. But even then, Ibrahim refused to stop. When the evening finally came, the world turned copper. The heat softened, but his strength faded. He collapsed beside a cluster of rocks, the first he had seen all day. The air cooled just enough for him to breathe. He took off his pack, lay flat on the sand, and stared at the sky. The sun dipped low, and the first stars appeared, sharp and bright, like diamonds scattered across a dark sea. The desert at night was a different creature, quiet, cold, and full of secrets. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to think of her.
Layla.
Her name was a wound that never healed. Her laughter still echoed in his mind. She had died on the edge of this very desert, taken by the fever, taken by fate. And when she was gone, Ibrahim made a vow. He would cross the desert she had always dreamed of seeing. Alone. He would reach the other side, the place where she once said the sand meets the sea, and leave a part of her there. That was why he walked. He whispered her name once more before sleep claimed him, the stars blurring above him. The desert hummed in the distance, low, steady, almost like breathing. And in the silence something moved. A faint whisper of wind brushed over his face. The sand around him shifted, as if the desert itself was listening. Ibrahim's eyes opened slowly. The night was darker now, colder. The stars flickered strangely, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw shapes moving across the dunes, shadows that had no owners, forms that drifted like smoke. He blinked. They were gone. Maybe the heat had begun to play with his mind. He closed his eyes again, clutching his pack close. The desert was watching him, but Ibrahim did not turn back. The dawn came, without warning. A gray light touched the dunes first, then spread like a thin veil over the endless desert. Ibrahim woke shivering. The sand beneath him, once burning, was now cold and damp with the breath of the night. His lips were dry, his eyes heavy. Every bone in his body ached. He sat up slowly and looked around. No landmarks, no signs of life, only waves of golden sand rolling into infinity. The desert had erased his footprints again, as if trying to deny he had ever existed. He took a careful sip of water, just one, and closed the flask tightly. Only a few drops remained. He thought of turning back for a brief moment, but then he remembered Layla's voice. Never stop in the middle, Ibrahim. The middle is where the weak turn to dust. Her words were like fire in his chest. He stood up, brushed the sand off his clothes, and began walking again. The sun rose higher, sharper, crueler. The air turned heavy, vibrating with heat. His sandals sank into the sand with every step. The world shimmered like liquid gold. Time lost its meaning. Minutes felt like hours, and hours stretched into something endless. By midday, his throat was burning. He had to force his tongue from sticking to the roof of his mouth. Sweat no longer came. The desert was taking water from him faster than he could give it. His vision began to blur, and shapes danced in the distance. At first he thought it was just the heat, but then he saw it clearly, far ahead, something that shimmered blue. Water. It couldn't be, but it looked so real. He began to run. The sand shifted beneath his feet, sucking him down like soft quicksand, but he didn't stop. His heart pounded, his breath came in painful bursts. The blue pool grew larger, brighter. He could see its edges now, sparkling in the sun. And then nothing. He stumbled forward into dry sand. His hands hit the ground.
The pool vanished.
Only the empty dunes remained. The heat trembled in the air, mocking him. Ibrahim sank to his knees, gasping. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a cry, not quite a laugh. Just a broken, breathless noise. A mirage, he whispered to himself. You think I'll fall for that? He stayed there for a while, his shadow small and trembling beside him. When the afternoon came, a new danger appeared, the wind. It started as a whisper, then grew into a roar. Sand lifted into the air in swirling waves. The horizon vanished. The world turned orange and wild. Ibrahim wrapped his scarf around his face and pushed forward, blind. The storm screamed around him, filling his mouth and eyes with grit. He couldn't see the sun anymore, only the spinning blur of sand and wind. His steps grew clumsy. He fell, stood, fell again. At last, he dropped to the ground and crawled toward the faint outline of a rock formation. He pressed himself against it, shielding his face as the storm raged. For what felt like hours, the wind tore at him. It howled like voices from another world, echoes of the dead, calling his name. Ibrahim, Ibrahim. He pressed his hands to his ears. Go away, he shouted into the storm. But the voices didn't stop. They whispered stories of travelers who had come before him, who had vanished without a trace. Men whose bones now slept under the dunes. And then, one voice rose above the rest.
Soft.
Familiar. Why did you leave me? Ibrahim froze. It was Layla's voice. He turned, eyes wide, but there was no one there. Only sand swirling in ghostly shapes. He reached out, trembling, as if she might be standing just beyond the storm's veil. Layla. The wind answered with silence. Then slowly, the storm began to die. The air cleared, and the desert returned to its stillness. When the silence finally settled again, Ibrahim was shaking. He could still feel her voice inside him, warm and real, as if she had been standing right beside him. He sat down against the rock, exhausted, and watched the dying light spread across the sand. The sun was sinking now, bleeding orange into purple. He opened his bag and took out a small object wrapped in cloth. Carefully, he unwrapped it. Inside was a silver pendant, Layla's pendant, the one she used to wear every day. He closed his eyes, holding it tight in his palm. "I'm still walking, Layla," he whispered. "I promised I would. I'll find the sea you dreamed of. I'll leave this for you there." As the last of the daylight faded, he lay down against the rock, clutching the pendant close. The stars came out again, clear, sharp, countless. The wind softened to a gentle hum. But as Ibrahim drifted into half-sleep, something stirred nearby. From behind a dune, two glowing eyes watched him, silent, curious, reflecting the starlight. The shape was low and slender, moving without sound. Perhaps it was a desert fox, or perhaps something older, something that belonged only to the desert. Ibrahim never saw it. He dreamed of water, of laughter, and of a horizon where gold met blue. The desert, for now, let him sleep. When dawn returned, it did not come gently. The first light was harsh, cutting through the thin air and waking Ibrahim from a dream he couldn't remember. His eyes stung with sand, his throat felt like cracked stone, and his limbs were heavy, as if filled with lead. The silence was so deep it pressed against his ears. He sat up slowly. The desert had changed color again. It wasn't gold anymore. It was pale, almost white, like a bleached sea of bones. The wind was gone. The air stood still. And Ibrahim felt, for the first time, that the desert was no longer just a place. It was watching him. He brushed the sand from his clothes and looked at the rock that had sheltered him through the night. On its side, he saw something faintly carved, lines and symbols. They were old, almost erased by time, but one of them looked like an eye. He stared at it uneasy. "You've been here long before me," he murmured, "and you'll be here long after." He took one last sip of water, only a drop, and stood up. The world swayed before his eyes, and he had to steady himself. His body screamed for rest, but the thought of stopping was worse. Stopping meant dying here, and he wasn't ready for that. Not yet. He began walking again. The morning dragged like a slow punishment. The dunes rose higher, the sand softer. His steps sank deep, each one harder to lift. His vision wavered. Sometimes he thought he saw footprints beside his own, shadows walking next to him. But when he looked down, the sand was untouched. By midday, his mind began to drift. He wasn't sure what was real anymore. He saw Layla again. Not her ghost this time, but the memory of her, walking a few paces ahead. Her hair was dark and unbound, her steps light, as if she were floating. She turned and smiled. "You're almost there," she said. Her voice was soft, carried by the wind. He tried to call her name, but his lips wouldn't move. His breath came out as dust. The vision lingered for a while, her dress fluttering, her laughter echoing faintly, until the light shifted and she was gone. He stumbled forward, chasing her shadow, whispering her name. "Layla, wait." But there was nothing waiting. Only sand. Only heat. Sometime later, he didn't know how long, he found himself at the edge of a flat plain of white rock. It looked like the bottom of a dried lake. The sand had given way to cracked earth, its surface split into thousands of patterns. He stepped onto it, and it felt cold beneath his feet. In the center of that empty plain stood something impossible.
A well.
A single, round stone well, half buried in the earth. Its rim was carved with strange markings, and it looked ancient, too ancient for any map. He blinked, thinking it was another mirage. But when he stepped closer, he felt the stone under his hands. It was real. He leaned over the edge. Darkness. Then, just faintly, a glimmer of water deep below. His heart raced. His hands shook. Could it be true? He dropped a small stone in. It fell, and then splash. Water. With trembling fingers, he tied a rope from his bag around a metal cup and lowered it. When he pulled it back up, the cup was full. He lifted it to his lips. But then, something stopped him. The water wasn't clear. It shimmered strangely, catching the sunlight like quicksilver. And when he looked closer, he saw his reflection. Not the man he was, but the man he used to be. Young, strong, with Layla beside him. She was laughing, holding his hand. He froze. The reflection rippled, and Layla's image turned toward him. Her lips moved. "You can rest now, Ibrahim." He dropped the cup. It clattered against the stone, spilling the water onto the ground. His heart pounded. He stumbled back from the well, gasping. "No," he whispered. "You're not real." But even as he said it, the laughter echoed again, soft, distant, haunting. The sound of the past trying to pull him back. He turned away and forced himself to walk. He didn't look back, not once. Behind him, the well shimmered for a moment, and then, like everything else in the desert, it vanished into the air. By late afternoon, Ibrahim was fading. His body had reached its limit. The heat pressed down like a hammer. His head throbbed. He could barely keep his eyes open. When he fell this time, he didn't try to get up right away. The sand was hot beneath him, but his mind didn't care anymore. His thoughts drifted between dream and memory. He saw his home, the mud brick walls, the smell of bread baking, Layla sitting by the window humming softly. He saw the day she fell ill, the helplessness in his hands. He saw himself holding her hand as her breathing slowed, her last smile faint but full of peace. "Promise me," she had whispered, "you'll see the sea for both of us." He had promised. And now, somewhere beyond the dunes, the sea still waited. He opened his eyes, forcing his body to move. One more step. One more dune. He didn't know how far the sea was, but he would crawl if he had to. The sun fell behind him, leaving the desert bathed in the red of dying fire. His shadows stretched long and thin across the sand, fading with the light. And as the night came, Ibrahim whispered, half to himself, half to the wind, "I'm still walking, Layla. Still walking." That night, as he rested beneath a broken moon, he dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't a dream of the past. He saw the sea, vast and endless, its waves whispering his name. And on its edge, Layla stood barefoot in the surf, smiling softly. "You're almost there," she said again. "Just one more day." He reached for her, and woke to find the desert around him glowing silver under the moonlight, still endless, still waiting. But something had changed inside him. The fear was gone. The pain was still there, but it had a purpose. The desert was no longer his enemy. It was his witness. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow I will reach it. And with that promise, Ibrahim closed his eyes, the silver pendant clutched in his palm. The desert slept around him, silent, vast, and eternal. The morning of the fourth day was unlike any other. The sky was not gold or red but pale gray, as if the desert itself had grown tired of color. The wind was cool, almost gentle. For the first time, Ibrahim didn't wake to the sting of heat or the ache of thirst, but to a deep, strange calm. He opened his eyes and felt a difference in the air. The horizon was hazy, but somewhere beyond it, he thought he saw movement, a faint shimmer that wasn't mirage, wasn't light. It looked like waves. He blinked hard, unsure if his mind was playing tricks again. But something deep inside whispered, "Keep going." He stood, slow and weak, and began to walk. The dunes were smoother now, less cruel. The sand was softer, cooler beneath his feet. He could feel the world changing around him. The wind carried a smell he hadn't known for days, something faint and sharp, like salt. Salt. He stopped, his heart racing. He inhaled again. It was there. The air smelled of salt and water. "The sea," he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. His legs trembled as he pushed forward. The sun climbed higher, but it no longer felt like fire. Clouds drifted across the sky, pale and thin. He hadn't seen clouds since the beginning of his journey. They gave the sky a softness he had forgotten existed. Every step was agony now. His feet were torn, his lips cracked to bleeding, but none of it mattered. The thought of the sea pulled him onward like an invisible hand. He stumbled down a long slope of sand and fell to his knees. His breath came in short, dry gasps. He couldn't stand anymore. The desert blurred around him. For a moment, everything was quiet. And then he heard it. A sound so faint it could have been imagined. A low, distant roar. The sound of waves. He lifted his head, and his eyes filled with tears that burned against the dryness of his skin. It was real. The sea was real. He was close. He tried to rise, but his body wouldn't move. His strength had left him completely. He collapsed again, face in the sand. His vision dimmed. "No, not now," he murmured. "Not before I see it." He crawled, inch by inch, dragging himself forward. His hands sank into the burning sand, but he didn't stop. He would not stop. Not when he was this close. Every breath was a struggle. Every movement was a war. But through the blur of pain, the light ahead grew brighter, silver and blue mixed together. And then, just as his body began to fail him completely, he reached the top of a small rise. Below him, stretching endlessly, was water.
The sea.
It was not a mirage. It was alive. The sunlight danced on its surface, rippling and shimmering like liquid glass. The waves rolled gently toward the shore, their white foam kissing the edge of the golden sand. Ibrahim froze. He couldn't breathe. The sight was too much, too beautiful, too real. Tears welled in his eyes and spilled down his dusty face. He fell to his knees, laughing through the sobs. The sound broke in his throat, half joy, half disbelief. "Layla, I found it. I found your sea." He crawled the last few feet and let the waves touch his fingers. The cold water stung his skin like fire, shocking him awake. He cupped his hands, lifted the water to his lips, and drank. It was salty, bitter, but it was life. The taste filled him with something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He sat there for a long time, the waves washing over his feet, the wind whispering across his face. The sea was endless. The sky above it glowed pale and soft. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world was kind. When the sun began to sink again, Ibrahim took out the silver pendant from his bag. He held it tightly in both hands, pressing it to his heart. "You see it now, Layla," he whispered. "The sea you dreamed of. I brought you here, like I promised." He kissed the pendant once, and then stood, walking slowly into the water. The waves lapped at his legs, rising higher, wrapping around him with a cold embrace. He stopped when the water reached his knees and looked at the horizon, where sea met sky in perfect silence. Then, gently, he opened his hands and let the pendant fall. It slipped beneath the surface, disappearing into the deep. The ripples spread outward, catching the last light of the sun. For a long while, Ibrahim just stood there. The wind carried the sound of the sea, soft and endless, and the world seemed to hold its breath. He smiled. "You're free now, Layla," he said. "And so am I." As the night descended, Ibrahim returned to the shore and lay down on the sand. The stars appeared, one by one, bright and infinite above the dark sea. He closed his eyes, the rhythm of the waves lulling him toward sleep. He whispered her name once more, softly, lovingly, and the desert wind carried it out over the water. "Layla." The waves answered with a gentle sigh. And then silence. When the sun rose the next morning, it touched the desert and the sea with gold. The wind blew lightly across the dunes, smoothing away the marks of his journey. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, only the memory of a man who had crossed the burning sands alone and reached the edge of the world. Some say that if you stand on that shore at dawn, you can still hear his voice in the wind, whispering to the waves, "I found it.